Oh, hello there, and welcome to another episode of Cocktails with Cruising World. Here this week with Herb McCormick. He's in our Newport office, and we're going to be talking with sailor and adventurer and photographer. I'm not sure what order to put those in, but a guy of action, David Thoreson from, I think you're at your home in Iowa or your studio in Iowa?
Yeah, I'm at Lake Okoboji here in the Iowa Great Lakes region, which I know is kind of an oxymoron or something, but we have a lot of water here and great sailing.
That's pretty good. Good place to spend the summer. So, David, tell us what you've been up to lately. It's been a kind of a strange spring and summer, but what's been keeping you busy?
Well, I've gotten back into scow sailing this summer. I took a few years off from that. I figured this would be a good year to get back into the racing circuit, although our racing circuit is a little bit limited this summer with our yacht club activities. But I think after talking with you guys a little bit, I think sailing is something that we can all do. It's a great thing to do with your family, and also racing is excellent. So I've been doing that, doing a little remodeling and moving with my wife, and just trying to figure out what we're going to do this fall, back on the water and to the mountains in Colorado, and some other activities.
That sounds pretty good. Any great victories out there on the race course?
No, but I've had some excellent times sailing with my two nephews for the first time in my life. So I've gotten them both on the boat with me at the same time when we're trying to get them both skippering and getting up to speed on crewing and stuff. So that's kind of been the whole point of it this summer, is to have an active campaign with my family and kind of get everybody going.
That's pretty good. Hey, I forgot to mention at the outset, for those of you watching this, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A button, and feel free to type in any questions you might have for David, and Herb is going to be kind of watching those on the side, and we'll jump in and pass your thoughts along. But in the meantime, Herb, why don't you kick it off?
Well, Mr. David Thoreson, you and I have a bit of a history together. I'm not sure that everybody who's watching this will know that you and I were part of an expedition called Around the Americas that happened in 2009 and 2010. We set off from Seattle. We went north up through the Northwest Passage, and then down the coast of North and South America, around Cape Horn, in an easterly with the spinnaker up, and then back up to Seattle. So it was a 13-month trip and 28,000 miles. And I just have to say before we get going that I'm looking at this screen message of me, and now I'm looking at you. And I look at myself and I see this kind of old man who looks a little weathered, and you look pretty damn good, brother. You look as young as ever and vital, and it's really pissing me off a little bit. I just wanted to get that out there. But
good clean living, man.
But David, you were our guru up through the ice. You've been up there a couple of times, successfully once through the Northwest Passage, stopped once through the Northwest Passage. And I remember your mantra to me always was, the ice will tell us what our fate will be this summer. And ultimately, the ice did let us go through. We did make it through the Northwest Passage. But I'm curious. I know you follow it closely. You've been back to the Arctic since. What are you hearing about what's happening up in the Northwest Passage this summer?
Well, what I can tell you is conditions are really great right now for a Northwest Passage. Both directions are open, with the exception of the usual choke point, which is just south of Bellot Strait right now, which is a little plugged. But I'll show you an ice chart in a little bit. It looks like things are lessening up, and there's light ice concentration now, so I expect things to be pretty wide open in the next few days. And other than that, boats aren't really allowed in the Arctic this summer. Recreational boating of any kind is closed by the Canadian government, and the villages are closed. The indigenous villages are closed because they don't have any COVID cases up there yet, and they don't want any, because I'm sure that they would be decimated by the virus up there. They have very, very few medical clinics and hospitals and facilities like that. So I feel for them up there and what they're going through and trying to keep it out. But I also feel for the, for the boating, yachting community, that these adventurous opportunities aren't aren't out there to explore the world and share the stories.
Right, right. David, I'm just wondering. I know you mentioned that you might share some photos with us and some photographs. You were obviously the photographer on our expedition. I see over your shoulder you've got your latest book, Over the Horizon, and I've always one of the great collaborations of my life was writing the stories and having you illustrate them. Why don't you show us some photos?
Sure. If you don't mind, I'll share a screen and do a little PowerPoint. That's
Great.
all right.
That's
I'll do the
fantastic.
bullet point PowerPoint.
Fantastic.
We'll see how the technology works here. Yes?
No photos yet. We're still seeing you.
Is
There
that
we
my
go.
screen?
Yes,
You
sir. Got it now.
Okay. So I'll just do a quick overview. Here's Arctic ice, and this is what's been going on, and this is really what I've been doing with my lecturing and presentations, is talking about Arctic ice concentration, what's going on. This is about 37 days yet until the melt season ends. And right now, with the way the 2020 ice is, we're already at the average at the end of the melt season. So we've already lost a tremendous amount of ice this melt season, and we could be heading for a record low. And I don't know if any of you have been paying attention in Siberia this summer. It was 100.4 degrees. It was the highest temperature ever recorded in the Arctic. And needless to say that Siberian sea ice on the Northeast Passage side has really fallen off the chart, and it's wide open over there, and that's contributing to the overall loss of concentration. Here we go. This, for any of you sailors out there, this is what you're going to see when you look at ice charts. And I tried to condense the two. The right side is going to be the Eastern Arctic approach up the west coast of Greenland, and then going to your left on the screen into Lancaster Sound, and then into Prince Regent Inlet. Coming from the right, you're going over the top of Alaska and Canada, and then proceeding to the same sort of point, and there's a little square there you'll see, and that's the ice concentrated area right now where the plug is. Herb, you and I ran into that also. That's the same area that almost every year has a bit of a plug. Ice gets pressed in there, so it is opening up. And so here is today, and you'll see if you came down from the east, for instance, down south and through Bellot Strait, and then right into that parting way with Franklin Strait there toward Joahaven. You'll see there's a green area, and that's only 2/10 ice. And on Ocean Watch, for instance, we would have been able to go right through there, no doubt, pick our way through that ice like we did in Amundsen Gulf. So from there on, it's easy going to the west and over to Cambridge Bay. So that's what I'm seeing with the Northwest Passage. It looks like it would be very doable this summer, and I feel bad for those who had plans to head up that way. But I sit here in Iowa. This is the Iowa Great Lakes area, and I've been scow sailing, both MC scow sailing and also sea scows. This is really kind of scow country. It's a funny, fast lake sailing boat that we do here in the Midwest, and have a lot of fun with it. These are the A scows. They've been clocked at 36 knots. They're just beautiful, majestic, fun boat to sail. And Herb, have you been on an A scow?
I have not.
You have not, man. We got to get you guys out here for some A scow sailing.
Yeah,
sometime.
I'm in for that, man.
Maybe next year's inland championships here at Okoboji. So anyway, this is where I grew up sailing, and also got involved in water quality and kind of cut my teeth in this. And that's sort of what I do now. Is I'm an advocate for water quality, a healthy legacy for future generations, climate, ocean awareness. That's really what I'm trying to do now with my work as I move forward. And this is the area that I grew up, learned to sail as a boy. There I am as a little kid with my mom teaching me how to sail some 55 years ago or something. And so again, how do you become an expedition sailor when you grow up in Iowa? And I met a Minnesota hog farmer from southern Minnesota, just about 35 miles from here, and his name's Roger Swanson. Unfortunately, he passed away now, but not before sailing over 200,000 miles and leaving a pretty good mark and a legacy of his own as one of the best blue water sailors of probably the last century. He's right up there anyway. Sailing aboard his great yacht named Cloud 9, 57-foot Bowman Ketch, and I sailed about 40,000 miles with Roger over the course of 11 different voyages to both poles, below the Antarctic Circle and over the Arctic Circle, obviously. And this is how I learned polar sailing, seat of my pants with a Minnesota farmer, you know, pretty primitive back in the early 90s and lots of fun. But this is when I first started learning about the weather and climate conditions of the planet and really started studying it. And of course, one thing led to another. And in 1994, some 26 years ago, we headed for the Northwest Passage. So we went from the east and started from Lunenburg, actually, in Nova Scotia. And of course, when you go that route, you head up into the North Atlantic and avoid the ice edge and up the west coast of Greenland, and then you start to the west and get into the guts of the Northwest Passage. Circle to circle is the Northwest Passage, and our voyage would be some 7,000 miles from point to point. Sailing in the snow and ice, if you like the cold and can tolerate it, it's a ton of fun. It's pretty dangerous conditions, as you know, but I love the cold and it fits with me well. Up the west coast of Greenland, beautiful little towns here like Upernavik, and then you cross Baffin Bay and into the Northwest Passage, and this is where it really begins. You can stop in Erebus Bay, visit the graves, first graves of the Franklin expedition. Tremendous experience. You'll see there's a little boat with us on the left. That's Back of the Moon. So in 1994, there were exactly 2 boats and 9 people on the planet attempting the Northwest Passage. So it's not something that's ever been done a lot or really attempted a lot. More boats are going now, as we know, because of the ice conditions, but still very few in the scheme of things. Of course, we got stuck in the ice up there big time. We tried everything we could do to get out of it for a couple of weeks, but there was just no pushing our way south. We got to Resolute. We just couldn't get south into those channels where the big choke point is that I just showed you on the screen. And we had to leave and retreat in 1994 with our tails between our legs. We waited 13 years. Roger wanted to do it again. He was 75 years old, and he said, you know what, let's give it another shot. So we took off again, knowing that ice conditions, at least scientists were saying that there was less ice, and I kind of wanted to go up with my own eyes as an eyewitness and kind of ground truth the situation. So off we went again, up the west coast of Greenland, got to our northernmost point, an area that's called Devil's Thumb, traditional point along the coast there in Greenland, where hunters and fishermen over the eons have known that that's an area where the pack ice split. So we headed west from there and came back into Lancaster Sound, and where we were stuck in the ice, and lo and behold, guess what? There just wasn't any ice. And so that's what we witnessed in 2007. We were kind of shocked and astounded by what we were seeing. We continued, big high pressure, not a lot of wind, perfect for motoring, not very good for sailing, and just no ice. Lots of wind there after we got on the Alaskan coast and toward Point Barrow. Wind kicked up and we had some nice sailing days, and this is one of my favorite photos, obviously, that I've taken of the ocean. About 15-foot seas running, 35 knots of wind, small craft advisory along the coast, perfect day for sailing. And of course, we became the first American sailors in history to do that, east-west passage following Raoul Damodson's route, and we were pretty proud of that accomplishment. However, this rolled right into around the Americas. Literally, we did that in 2007, and then we left again in 2009. Big ocean awareness project, 28,000 miles that Herb alluded to, and here's Herb and I at Cape Horn having one of our great moments there together as mates and lifelong friends and brothers, as we always say now after a great experience like this. But what an amazing experience. I'll just stick just a couple more slides to the Arctic experience. We headed north through Amundsen Gulf and what we're doing again was collecting stories, visiting scientists, spending time with bowhead whale, both scientists and hunters, talking about the conservation movement up there that brought hunters and scientists together to help protect the bowhead whale, spending time with quirky scientists like George DeVoke on remote islands that are studying species and learning about the changing climate in the process, and how they live in these remote places. And I think Herb said that this was the easiest interview we ever did. He asked George one question and he talked for something like an hour. I'm not sure, but anyway, he used to live in that little tent. Now he lives in the bear-proof hut there that can be pushed over and rolled around if need be. We stopped in hunting caps and visited with hunters and fishermen, and again, collecting stories that we could then share to spread awareness about the conditions in the north. This is an ice cave where traditional families could keep their food down under 30 feet under the shores of Tuktoyaktuk, and classic cultural refrigeration from thousands of years they've been doing this. We got a little bit of ice in Amundsen Gulf, which was fun to try to push through. It was a good challenge for us for about 60 or 80 miles or so, I think, Herb. And that was a fun experience for us, meeting other explorers like Kevin Tony that were going through in a 17-foot open boat. And these are the kinds of folks that you meet when you're in the far north. Getting into Joahaven, where Amundsen had dropped his hook some 100 years plus earlier, and enjoying the locals there and meeting some other sailors. And of course, these nice halcyon days, as we call them, where we would wait for a weather window and then slowly motor through the kind of pristine waters of the far north and take in the beautiful sights of the polar bears and reflections of the ice flows that were passing us by. And this is kind of the beauty, serene beauty that I love to photograph and experience in these remote places, and what keeps drawing me back to them. And I'll always have that place in my heart for the Arctic and the North. The massive glaciers we met again once we got back out into Baffin Bay. They were kind of your friends for a while, but then once we started getting the night, as we headed further south, they become very dangerous, these icebergs at night. Sometimes you can pick them up on radar, but you can't always trust those conditions. And of course, the ability with digital photography to shoot in almost dark conditions with the moon rising and an iceberg in the background and rough seas has been something that's kind of revolutionized photography out there on the ocean. And just beautiful, beautiful sailing days in the far north. And here's a picture of Herb that I'll just end with here, and very reflective moment in the Arctic, as it looked like we pretty much knew that we would make it through the Northwest Passage at that point. And I remember that like it was yesterday, Herb. So I'll just leave you there and go back with you guys, and that's my little show. So you guys take it from here.
That's a lovely walk down memory lane, David, man. And I always love seeing your images. They're fantastic. I'm wondering, David, so we got through pretty easily in 2009. In the subsequent years, there were attempts made through the Northwest Passage, and everybody, of course, knows and hears about the huge loss of sea ice over the years there. But from season to season, there can be blockages, and I think sometimes people don't quite understand what those dynamics are when there's a great loss of ice over a decade, but in an individual year you might not be able to get through. Can you kind of explain what that phenomenon is and why that happens?
Absolutely. And I think in sort of an ironic twist of history, the explorers for 4 centuries or so were looking for the Northwest Passage as the route to the Orient. And as it turns out, the Siberian side, what's called the Northern Sea Route now, will probably end up being the preferred passage. And if you take a look at the globe straight down, looking at the North Pole and out, you'll see that the great land masses are on the Northwest Passage side. Greenland juts up, all of the archipelago of islands of the Canadian Arctic jet up far to the north, much farther than the Siberian side of things. And what happens with the Beaufort Gyre and just how the ice moves in the Arctic, remember, it's not stationary, it's always moving. And it rotates around and moves and presses into that archipelago of islands on the Canadian side, and then gets pressurized and pushed. And also with the currents moves down into those areas that I just showed you on the ice charts. The other thing that's happening is that with more melting, it releases more older ice. So the melting has pushed further and further back into what's left of the older ice. So the older ice flows, which are much deeper and harder to penetrate and harder to melt, they get lodged in some of these choke points, and they're not going anywhere. So there can be a ribbon of ice. For instance, Roger tried in 2005, and a number of other boats did, and they needed Coast Guard assistance to be rescued and get out of there because of just this small choke point that was clogged up. And that's sort of the gist of it, is that there's still a lot of ice there. There's a lot of ice. And there will continue to be a lot of ice, but the ice isn't stationary and it moves.
Right, right. David, talk about, I know you've traveled back to the Arctic subsequently to our trip. Can you talk about a bit more about your travels after Ocean Watch and sort of your overall impressions? Are you, how do you feel about what's happening up there, not only to the climate, but to the people who live there?
Yeah, one of the things I've been doing is, really after we got back from Ocean Watch and around the Americas, was to continue work as an educator and talking about what's happening, especially in polar areas that I love. So I started working with different conservation groups, and a group I work with a lot is called the Alaska Wilderness League, and they're specifically focused on protecting public lands and indigenous people like the Gwich'in. And so I've been spending time up in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge photographing with conservationists and actually embedding with the Gwich'in community and shooting photographs and interviews there in the far north. And they're very concerned not only with climate change that they're having to adapt to right now, but also with the potential of drilling within the refuge that will disrupt and maybe cull the caribou herd that they depend on for their existence. So I was in the village of Old Crow, for instance, 2 years ago. That's in the Yukon, about 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle. And so Old Crow's on the Porcupine River, and that's where the porcupine caribou migrate. And they're worried now because 3 years in a row, the caribou hadn't showed up along their normal migratory route. And that's because the climate is changing and is so variable now in the Arctic that the caribou have been knocked off their traditional migratory routes by the weather variability now from year to year. So you might have summer that happens in May, and then it switches to snow that happens in June. And there's more rain events, for instance, now, and then that freezes, and animals like caribou don't have an adapted hoof that can pull the ice away to get to the lichen that they eat. So they starve and they die. And so the porcupine caribou herd, for instance, is one of the last, I guess, really sound caribou herds in the world. And so there's 10,000 people in 17 communities that live in that area. So this is just one issue that I've been looking at about the people who are struggling up there, trying to figure out how we can save, protect faraway wilderness areas that, yes, they may have some natural resources that could potentially help our economy, but we also have American and Canadian citizens up there who are trying to live in a more culturally pure way like their ancestors did, who are dependent on the natural world. So these are the issues that I keep trying to bring to people's attention and bring awareness to these things, that people do still live out there by hunting and fishing, and we need to be able to support those people and those places.
And what are you hearing about? I know in the news lately, we're starting to hear, and I guess it's something that's recurring all the time, that these oil leases and gas leases they constantly seem to be in play these days. What's your take on the current situation in that regard?
Well, seeing how I got about 6 alerts from my friends at the Alaska Wilderness League and Sierra Club and some other folks, I reckon I'll be back up in the Arctic very soon again with some folks. It's a legal battle now, and it's really being fought out in the courts. There is not the kind of protective status yet for the for some of these places, and unfortunately, with technology right now and drilling technology, you can get into these places much easier. And with climate change, they're much more accessible. But as we know, if you're in the coastal area, right off the coastal plain, that area along the Alaskan coast is very, very dangerous, even in the summertime. If you remember that ice chart that I showed you, the ice right now is only about 100 miles offshore. So if the wind and situation changes, you can have ice pressing again immediately, whether it's on a ship or on a rig or what have you. So the conditions are dangerous there for drilling offshore. Onshore drilling, different story. And the problem with places like the coastal plain are all of the river systems flow north out of the Brooks Range, and they flow north. And to get in there, they're going to have to come east to west with dams and bridges and roads. And so it may be, as far as area wise, it may be a small percentage, but the kind of damage and, potential impact on the area is very great. There's going to be a lot of seismic activity. There's a lot of polar bear denning there. And I've met a number of scientists who are studying that right now. They can even find these polar bear dens with drones now. They're equipped with infrared sensors, heat sensors. So the technology is changing. I know that if they do drill, every effort will be made to try to have a lesser impact. But with coronavirus, we're seeing a worldwide impact where there's a glut of oil right now, and we don't necessarily need this excess oil in any way. It's just getting exported or stored right now around the world. So I'm hoping that the conservation side of things obviously will win out, but in this environment we're in right now, there's no easy answers or solutions.
David, we were talking earlier today about shifting more towards your own sort of home waters, Lake Okoboji in Iowa, and you have many photographs lately on social media, but particularly a widespread article that was written in the publication Vox, and some of the kind of disturbing images that you took. Can you tell people a little bit about what's happening sort of in your own backyard and on your home waters?
Yeah, well, number one, the state of Iowa is kind of one of the red hotspots as far as coronavirus. We're actually, like if people travel to this state and then go home, they have to have a mandatory 2-week quarantine. So we're kind of on that list. And the Iowa Great Lakes area, as a big tourist area, is also kind of a hotspot right now. So most of us are being careful, and some people are not. Like many places around the country, we had a huge Trump boat rally just a couple weeks ago. We ended up, I don't know, estimates are somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400 boats were on the lake here. I mean, it's one of the biggest ever in the history of the United States. And, boats were 5 or 10 abreast going around the lakes. They caused a lot of lakeshore erosion and also congregated in one of the bays where they dropped anchors. And we had 400 to 500 boats and people having these kind of massive rafting boat parties in a time of COVID-19. And I took all these photographs and a bunch of drone photos, and they've gotten a lot of attention, not just locally, but around Iowa and nationwide. a lot of the people that are here, Iowa's a big vacation spot in the summertime. Our neighbors are from Florida, and we have our other neighbors are from California. So people are in from all over the place, not to mention places like Sioux Falls, so like Nebraska and Omaha, Nebraska, Minnesota, and all over the country. So people come in and they come out, and these huge congregations of people partying and having these huge lake parties are transmitting the virus around. And so I've been trying to spread the awareness of, come on, folks, we have to be doing better, because we're going into school season trying to open up next week. And now we have schools opening for a week like North Carolina and shutting right down. Iowa State University just had 200 cases reported today. And they just had all these huge house parties down there. So they're probably going to be shut down within a couple weeks. And so anyway, it's a tough situation. I know places like Newport are having, it's similar, where people are traveling and they want to be in a nice place where there's good, high quality recreation and healthy outdoor things to do. But then they start congregating and going to bars, and then this damn thing spread. So we all have to figure out how we can do better and get through this thing so that we can get back to our normal activities, hopefully sometime this winter, spring. It's what everybody wants, but we're all going to have to sacrifice and wear the masks and do a few more Zoom meetings and do all this kind of stuff that we hate to do right now before we can get back to having a lot of fun with more people. And obviously I love speaking to crowds. I love being around people and doing presentations and meeting new folks, and all that's come to a big abrupt end. And I think all of us are just missing getting out with folks, and I hope we can get back to that soon, but let's do our part, right?
Absolutely, mate. I couldn't agree with you more. David, I know you've spent your life literally traveling the globe as a sailor, as an adventurer, as a photojournalist. What's on your bucket list? What do you want to do that you haven't done? What's still out there for you?
Well, the one thing I'd like to do with my own boat in this decade is I've been planning a Gulfstream project for a number of years, and I would like to sail the Gulfstream and kind of end up in the Norway, Svalbard kind of area, and highlight the importance of the Gulfstream and ocean currents in general, this ocean conveyor belt system, to the importance of our kind of planetary climate system. It's our air conditioning and warming, heating and cooling system of the planet. And I don't think enough people realize that. And I think it'd be a hell of a sail. And also it'd be a good educational component. I'm working with a friend now in California, a new friend. I might be on a powerboat next year in the Northwest Passage on a 65-foot trawler with a friend who wants to do a lot of filming and stories and drone work and science up there. So we're hoping maybe that'll work out. And I still got to finish a bicycle trip. And so I would like to bike to Tuktoyaktuk. How about that?
How do you do that? What's the route?
Well, the route is to, kind of head out west, and then up north through Northwest Territories, Yukon, and you take the ice road, and you end up, that's the only road that ends up at the ocean at Tuktoyaktuk. So follow the Mackenzie River, and I think it'd be a hell of a bike trip. You might have to join me for some of that.
I might be up for some of that, actually.
But I'm thinking, as far as like social isolation, I'm trying to think of some things, for next year that are, have been on my bucket list for a long time. If COVID's still active, what we can do. The other thing I'm actively working on with the Explorers Club and some other folks is working with Mary Crowley. Do you know Mary? On her Ocean Plastics Initiative and Ocean Voyages Institute. And so that's something I've been active with is ocean plastics. And I was hoping to actually get out with her this summer. And because of COVID, I just couldn't get out to Hawaii and get on a vessel without having to quarantine for a couple weeks. But I have a feeling I could be with her next summer also, flying drones out there and trying to work on expanding that project. So there's four big projects on my bucket list. How
Good
about
on
that?
you, mate. Cool.
That's pretty good. Hey, well, I got you two guys here.
Yeah.
For some of the sailors out in the viewing
Sure.
world here, talk a little bit what it's like to be. I mean, you guys were many tide changes together. There were four of you, right? The core crew. You know, how do you manage relations and you're sailing to a pretty forced schedule? Kind of talk about what life on the Ocean Watch was like, if it doesn't bring back too many painful memories.
Go ahead, Herb.
Oh man, that's a loaded question. Well, there were four of us, a core crew that did the entire trip. We were joined for much of the trip by an oceanographer called Michael Reynolds, who wasn't a real experienced sailor at the outset, but he got into it. We had a lot of rotating crew of scientists who came aboard and educators. So I think by the time, we had probably 35 or 40 crew over the course of the trip, David, something like that.
Yeah, we did.
But well, some of the time the boys got a little, irascible. But for the most part, we got along well. And I wasn't kidding. David wasn't kidding when I do think we kind of started out friends and we ended up brothers. And, sometimes we fought like brothers or got, upset with one another like you do sometime in a family. Or not everything every day isn't as harmonious. And we were off on a very wicked schedule. We left on a June 1st or thereabouts, and there was an X on the calendar for June 13th the following year. And we were there that June 13th or whatever it was the following year. So it's not the ideal way to voyage. We're running an article by Lynn Party this month that, the calendar is the enemy of the cruising sailor, because you really don't want to try to work to a schedule. But, we had sponsors and we had places where we needed to be to do presentations. So we jammed a lot of the time. So it was an unusual trip in that way. But for the most part, I think we got along pretty well. Right, David?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just thinking while you were saying that, my wife called us the most sleep-deprived people on the planet. And I think we really were for a year. I mean, it was like 4 on, 4 off for a lot of days. And you really didn't have time to stay pissed off too long because, if you were upset about something, you were just back working again. So, you really didn't have time to get too upset about things. We just keep chugging away and everybody did their job. And, Mark Schrader and Dave Logan were just, great people. And I think we had the better watch though on our side of things because Michael Reynolds, our scientist, used to be a drummer in a Texas blues band. And he had this great collection of blues music that when we ran out of things to talk about it on late night watches, he'd crank up the blues music. And that was a lot of fun. But, we did a lot of things to make the voyage fun and exciting and kind of keep it going for all of us. We got off the boat and did things together and when we could. And there were a lot of kids and new people to meet. And that really, people ask me all the time, in all the places we traveled to, did you have like any bad experiences? And I have to say, not really. Almost everybody I met was great in this whole time that we were out there for a year. And it kind of reaffirmed my belief that, overall, humans are just pretty damn good. And we're all kind of trying to achieve the same things in life, have a little fun while we're here and enjoy our families and have some good times and make new friends. And that's kind of what cruising sailing is really all about.
Hey, David, I have a quick question from one of our viewers here, and going back
Sure.
to how you make your living, which is as a photographer. And one of our viewers wants to know: did you ever lose drones while you're up in the Arctic, and what happened when you did, if you did?
Well, unfortunately, my career has been such that drones really just sort of started happening after I returned from Ocean Watch, the kind of consumer drones that, you know, everybody has right now and are shooting, like the DJIs, the Phantoms and the Mavics and all that kind of stuff that have revolutionized things. I have both now, and I took drones with me up in the Arctic the last time I went. So they've revolutionized my work for sure. And I sure wish that we would have had them, you know, in the Arctic on Ocean Watch. Would have just been unbelievable. I can't think about it too much because that does piss me off, actually. But you know, that's what happens. But I do enjoy the fact that, you know, the technology changed to the point where photography advanced from where, you know, I used to take off to go meet Roger and I'd have 10,000 frames of film and, you know, like 30 hours of videotape and backpacks chock full of all this kind of stuff that, you know, you had to watch how many times you went through X-ray machines and all of this stuff. So I do enjoy the fact that photography has changed so much and things have gotten smaller and better. And in a sense, it's easier. The charging components and all that kind of stuff, I don't like, you know, all the time spending on computers and backing things up. You know, that's a chore that you have to be diligent about. But drones have really revolutionized things. And that's one of the reasons why I want to get back on a boat in the Arctic.
David, what's your go-to camera these days?
My go-to cameras are the Nikon Z7s, Z6 and 7. I carry both, and I have Nikon D850s I shoot with. I love the Nikon mirrorless system, and that's what I use to shoot video with now. And then I still keep an 850 big body around for my big lenses that I do carry, although I don't use them as much. But I love the lighter mirrorless stuff. I think, again, it's something that's really revolutionized photography, and I love the fact they're super quiet. I can shoot so stealthy now in crowds around folks at events and things that they don't even know you're shooting. So it's been a wonderful thing, and shooting in the low light kind of situations that you get in on a moving boat where you can't necessarily shoot with a tripod, and it's amazing. So I love it, and that's kind of my go-to rig.
Cool.
How about you? How about you guys? What are you shooting with?
I'm a big Canon guy, and I tell you, the camera I use mostly is this little Pentax point and shoot. You can stick it in your pocket. You can go swimming. You can wade ashore.
There you go.
You know, you have it. If you don't have the camera, you can't take the picture.
That's exactly right. Herb, have you gotten a new camera yet? What do you got?
I just bring you along with me, brother.
Okay. It's great.
Hey, I think we're kind of just about out of time. At the beginning, I was supposed to give a little plug to our sponsor, Mount Gay. Drink of choice of many sailors. I mixed mine up with a little orange juice today. David, what are you sipping there?
Well, I was a little afraid of getting into the rum too early, so I'm just having a Corona.
Good choice. And Herb?
A Corona for the Corona.
I must say that I went to our little drink cart here in the office, and I'm scandalized by the fact that there was nothing. I heard there was some jostling around going on out there a little earlier, and I believe that we were raided. So I'm on the seltzer water at the moment. Thank you.
You're working
What
in
kind
a
was that?
environment.
What kind was that, Herb?
Polar, mate.
But
Polar.
yeah, there you go. I thought I saw that flash by, so that was pretty apropos. Love it.
Hey, David, thank you so much for joining us. It was a real pleasure to talk to you, and those photos were just spectacular.
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed spending the cocktail hour with you guys, and hopefully I can tune in for another one. So thanks a bunch. Thanks, Mount Gay. Hope to see you guys soon down the road somewhere.
And Herb, we'll give you the last word because you take it anyway.
I love you, my brother. You be well. Thank you so much. Till we meet again.
Love you too. Take care, all of you out there.
See you guys.
See you. Thank you. Bye-bye.